I'm Darren Morton,
I'm Simon Matthews. This is Lift.
the Lifestyle Medicine podcast where we dive into the science of health and well-being.
Hello, Darren. Nice to see you again.
Hello, Simon. Lovely to see you.
So, I've got a question for you.
Mm.
Have you ever had an experience, maybe doing something? You're a runner, for example, but you're also you in a previous episode we talked about how your wife said you're an ideas man, and I quipped that what she was actually saying was you're not an action man, but in fact you are an action man.
I am an action man
because
yes.
You run, you kite surf, you hang glide. I don't know, you probably do some other things as well. I'm sure you do some other things as well. So here's my question. During one of those activities, I wonder, have you ever had that experience of feeling your energy starting to flag, starting to run out of steam? You had that experience?
I've had that experience.
And what about after that? Have you then had a subsequent experience where you kind of push through that and you feel like your energy starts to pick up a little bit again?
Yeah, I actually do. I have one very vivid. So, I mean, we talk about hitting the wall or bonking is another name for it. And I've had that a couple of times. But one really bad time, I was just doing a bit of cycling, and we went down to, there's an event called the Tour Down Under, which is like the Australian, I was going to say lame equivalent of the Tour de France, but it's like all these professional cyclists there that they let you, and you go along, and we were watching the event, it's amazing, and they're all great athletes, but they let you do, as a community ride, they let you do one of the legs one day. It was about 100 miles. And anyway, so because you're in this massive pack and you've been watching all these elite riders, you're just full of the joy of living and you think that you're one of them too. Anyway, I remember I had a friend with me, and he was a good athlete, and we were on this peloton and we're racing along, and we were making the mistake of sometimes getting at the front of it, which is, having spent you're doing a lot of the work. Anyway, I was feeling so great, and we're going, and then we hit about 100 kilometres, 60 miles, and we had to turn straight into the winter. By this time, the peloton had broken up. We're all in smaller groups. And then all of a sudden, I just sort of thought, I don't feel so great anymore. And I started feeling, whoa. And then I said to my friend, Jared, I said, hey, Jared, you go in front now. And so he hops in front. And then I kept saying to him, just slow down a little bit. Now slow down a little bit more. Slow down a bit more. And in the end, he said, I can't go much slower than this. I'll fall off my bike. And I'm like, wow, we had been going really hard and quick. And then I looked at my speedo, and we were hardly traveling. And I was just locked onto watching his back cluster of his wheel. And there was a rest station at 140 kilometres. And I remember I literally just fell off the bike, and I lay there, and I was spacey. I almost felt like I had tunnel vision. And I just went, dude, I'm done. I actually cannot go on. And so anyway, he ended up I said, you just go. I'm just going to lie here. I had a gel, one of those energy gels. And about 5 minutes later, I started to feel a bit perky. And then I got back on the bike, and I rode the last 20 kilometres just as quick as we'd done the first 20 kilometres. It was the bizarrest thing.
Wow.
I literally felt like I'd come back from the dead.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's not really bizarre. I mean, there's some good science there, isn't there? I mean, it sounds like you were hypoglycemic, and you topped up a little bit and kept going. So that's a great example, Darren. I'm interested in one other part of this. So you said you kind of perked up and you did the last 20 kilometres as fast as the first. What do you remember about your mental state?
Yeah, I remember just feeling completely defeated. And it was a bit embarrassing because I thought, I know that, we've done 140 kilometres, I've only got 20 to go, and to actually physically lie there on the side of the road and go, I just can't, there's nothing I can do about this. I literally, I can't do anything about it. It's all over. It was.
And what do you remember about your mental state 5 minutes later after you had the gel?
When I got going again, I felt on fire. I felt like king of the road. And it was quite, obviously the fact that particular event I've done lots of events before. That one stands out in my memory, and I have vivid memories of that just feeling that last 20 kilometres going strong, coming back from that, just felt on top of the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in comparison to you, Action Man, I'm a little bit of Action Man. And a couple of weekends ago here in Madrid, I ran the Madrid half marathon, my first ever half marathon.
Yes. Yeah,
And
wow.
and similarly, I ran the first 11 kilometres of that pretty strongly at my usual kind of running pace, and then I don't remember exactly, but somewhere in the next couple of kilometres, I really noticeably started to slow down. Even as you were describing that feeling of spaciness, I remember feeling a little bit of that too. And I had some gels in my belt, so I grabbed some water from a water station, had a gel, and then really noticeably started to pick up again afterwards. And of course, we're talking about that phenomenon that pretty much all of us know. I think the phenomenon of getting a second wind, which obviously has a nautical history to it. Imagine a ship being becalmed in water, and then the wind picks up again, and the ship gets moving. But second winds are fascinating in life, and they happen both physically, but they also happen mentally as well, as we've just heard. So the phrase you used was amazing. Having gone from that point of feeling like you were wobbly, you were woozy, you were getting tunnel vision, you collapsed, you felt embarrassed, and so on. Then you felt like you were king of the road. Just this stunning kind of mental shift from that second wind phenomenon. So I wanted to talk today about second winds, and particularly second winds in relation to when we're endeavouring to do something hard, like make a behavioural change, make a health behaviour change. So we know that a second wind phenomenon has several parts to it. First of all, there's that energy system shift. So let's use the example of doing a physical activity. Your body's burning glycogen as fuel in order to accomplish that activity. If you're working hard enough, you're getting a lactate and a carbon dioxide build up. And all of those things together tend to cause fatigue. There's some hormonal things go on as well with adrenaline and noradrenaline. And if we look neurologically, then there are some events that go on in our brains that kind of match all these things. So our brain tends to engage what's called the default the default mode network. That means we tend to really kind of tune into discomfort and rumination and worry and so on. So to some extent, these things are kind of just byproducts of working hard. You can't really avoid that at some level.
It's interesting. I didn't know about that. Was the nautical origin of that term? I don't know what I'd ever thought why it was called a second wind. I just thought it was like you got your puff back or something or other. But that's interesting to me. What I think there is some misunderstanding around this is that the idea of from an energetic point of view, why? So, for example, someone like me, of my kind of build, I've probably got about 2,000 calories of stored carbohydrate or glycogen in my system, but I've probably got about, and I'm relatively lean, not as lean as I used to be, but comparatively speaking, I've probably got about 100,000 calories of stored fat, energy in the form of stored fat. And I've had many people say, how did I run out of energy? Like when doing something like a long, when I've got oodles of energy, like just look at this, here it is. And the truth, that is the truth. But when we start to exercise at higher intensities, we burn more of our carbohydrate, more of our glycogen, and we only have enough of that to keep us going for about 2 hours or so, typically, if you're going quite firm. You still have huge supplies of the fat, so you can oxidize the fat, but in order to burn fat, you actually need carbohydrate. So the little saying they use is fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. And so when you run out of the carbohydrate sources, that's when, even though you have lots of energy in the form of stored fat, you just can't liberate it and harness. Yeah. And this is, I think, why it also, when your carbohydrate levels are getting very low, why that brain thing starts to go a bit odd too. When it's the decision making, because obviously your brain purely, exclusively uses glucose for its energy source. So,
exactly right. And we're talking about the example. We're talking about physical activities here, things like running and cycling and so on. But that sort of fatigue happens or can happen to us in any sort of context. So even if we're talking about making a long-term behavioural change, really altering kind of the patterns of our daily lives, even though that doesn't necessarily require significant physical energy or glycogen, it does involve a lot of mental effort. So, the sorts of things that we can experience when we're really doing a hard thinking task can be things like getting stuck in that default mode network, getting stuck around rumination, really focusing on the discomfort, the pain, the worries, the concerns about whether we'll be successful here. That means, of course, that our mood tends to slowly decline over time. We end up in a worse mood. We also get, you made a reference to this a moment ago, we also get decision fatigue, which is a real thing. We know that people can get fatigued, mental fatigue, from having to make too many challenging decisions at once. And in fact, decision fatigue is often used as an explanatory factor for things like aircraft accidents where multiple things have gone wrong. And simply the rate at which the pilot had to manually make decisions about what to do was just exhausting. As an aside, this is one of the reasons why the recovery of the Qantas A380 that had an engine, more or less disintegration, an engine explosion many years ago, was so remarkable. There were 4 people on the flight deck, and they pooled their resources, even though the demands of that environment were mentally overwhelming for any one person. Together they pooled their resources and managed to land that plane safely. And all of these things together, the decision fatigue, getting stuck in the default mode network, the declining mood, it ends up having an impact on our own feeling of capability to be able to do this. So we end up in this kind of vicious cycle, this downward spiral where it feels like this is going to be impossible, I'm not going to get anywhere, I don't think I can do this, and so on. And unfortunately, that's the point where a lot of people kind of check out of the behavioural change cycle. They feel in that moment overwhelmed. And one of the things that I wish we could do, I guess we can do it, is remind people of the second wind phenomenon. Because we know that behaviour change is not a sprint. It is a it is a marathon, but behaviour change takes place progressively over a long period of time. And in any process of behavioural change, we should expect those dips, those pauses, even those reversals. And in fact, the trans-theoretical model of change alludes to this. It doesn't use the terminology second wind, But within the trans-theoretical model of change, there's an allowance or there's a recognition that people can lapse and or relapse in their behaviour. They can be moving forward quite well, they can be making progress, and then for whatever reason, their progress slows or stops, or they even revert to a previous undesired behaviour. So at least one of our models of behavioural change kind of has this idea placed in there, and it's a useful framework, I think, to help people to understand you are going to experience this, or you are very likely to experience this.
I actually liked it. I like where this is going. So basically what you're saying is this whole second wind phenomenon, which we typically apply to physical pursuits, where you have a down, low moment, but then you rise again. That exact same concept can be applied and does apply to behaviour change journeys where, you know what, be expected. Yeah. In fact, it's interesting. I was just chatting with, my son, my youngest son, he is right into running now. And he's interested in long distance running. So he's just made up his mind, and he declared about a week ago that he's going to run the entire Great North Walk, right, which is a walk from Newcastle to Sydney in Australia, 250 kilometres. He said, I want to do it in 5 days. So here I am spruiking this. So he's going to be accountable. So he's probably going to say, Dad, why did you tell everyone this? They're going to be asking me how it went. But nonetheless, what he said...
So that's legit. I just want to note this for a moment. He wants to do that in 5 days. That's literally... 6 marathons in 5 days.
That's correct. Yes. So that's the goal.
That is literally 6 marathons.
That's right. And wow. So he actually met with, I've got a couple of friends who do ultra marathons. And so he's met with them already and just trying to pick their brains. And one of the things that I heard them say, which is really pertinent to this discussion.
Lift is supported by the Lift Project, an educational adventure where you learn science-based ways to lift your mood and your life. The Lift Project is lifting lives around the globe, in healthcare settings, workplaces, schools, universities and communities. To find out more, visit theliftproject.global.
They said, you're going to have low moments. Expect you're going to have low moments, but you'll come back. You know what? You do the right thing, you rest well, you make sure your nutrition's good, and you'll have high moments too. And I think that having that understanding and that awareness preemptively is probably a very, very constructive thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. As is knowing the things that will help you stay the course. So you just mentioned that your friends had said to him, as long as your nutrition's right, as long as your rest is right, and so on. The metaphor that comes to mind for me is crossing a lake in a small boat during a storm. And it's pretty easy to get the visual of this. If the wind is blowing and the waves are kind of big, then that little boat is inclined to get tossed all over the place. But if you know where your aiming point is, and you know how to use the motor and the rudder, or the sails and the rudder in that boat, in order to keep that aiming point in sight, then there is a sense in which you can continue to move forwards despite the chaos that's going around you. And this is a really important part, I think, of the second wind phenomenon. And the physical elements, of course, if we look just at the idea of behavioural change, we don't. If I decide that I don't know what would be a good behaviour. If I decide I'm going to get 8 hours sleep every night this week and be in bed by 10 p.m., I'm not going to hit my lactate threshold doing that. There's not a physiological kind of depletion that goes on here, but there can be a mental depletion for all those reasons that we talked about. So helping people to understand exactly what you just said. This is not going. This is going to be a snakes and ladders journey. It's not going to be a single
that's a good analogy.
kind of upward line. And also, as practitioners, as coaches, or as physicians, or really any sort of health professional, we can also ask people questions before they begin a journey like this, a journey of behavioural change, to get them thinking about how they might manage this, how they might resource themselves to get through it. So questions that come to mind for me are things like, tell me about a time in the past when you wanted to quit and found new energy.
Yeah,
so what I'm doing is asking the person to, search through their memory banks and just look for something that's kind of representative of this. And once they've named that, of course, then I'm going to be curious about, where did you get that new energy from? What did you do to bring that new energy forth? What did you do to keep yourself moving forward, and so on? So again, what I'm aiming to do is name strengths and capacities and resources that the person can draw upon. I might ask similarly, what have you noticed happens when you push past that first resistance that you come across? And I don't know if you have this experience, Darren. I always have this when I run. Doesn't matter how much I run. Doesn't matter how much I'm training. That I start running, I feel great. About maybe probably the second half of the first kilometre, maybe 600 metres. 600 metres, I really start to have this feeling of, oh my goodness, and that persists for about 600 metres. And then after I get past that sort of first kilometre, I get to about 1.5 kilometres, then I feel like I'm just starting to settle into a bit of a rhythm. Well, so there's that initial kind of resistance to push through, and then things start to settle or unfold. Another really useful question is, what have you noticed about how long it usually takes you to settle in? How long does it usually take you to settle into a new rhythm or a new routine? And that can help someone adjust their expectations about what might be coming as well. So sometimes we go into behavioural change with the wrong expectation. We think, right, okay, I'm going to sleep 8 hours every night this week. So in bed at 10, up at 6. But we don't sort of necessarily take account of, at 9:30. We're still watching an episode of a show we started watching, which has turned out to be a bit of a cliffhanger, and now I feel a little bit torn. Or a friend or relative calls and they need some support or assistance, and now you've got that whirling around in your mind as well, or it's been a difficult day at work, or any one of a number of things can happen that can inhibit us from just settling into that routine. So it's useful to reflect on the idea that this can take some time, and it's not necessarily straightforward.
To use your running example, I run. My boys now can run quicker than me, probably on a good day. But whenever we run together and we do our local park run, and all the young fellas just take off, and then I actually have to, in my head, mentally go, okay, just don't let them get too far ahead, and then eventually as you wind up and get going. So I have this deliberate analogy that I use in my head where I think I used to have what they've got, which is a petrol engine. Like it revs high and it goes quick. You can take off quick. Now I've got a diesel engine, right? And it takes a while for a diesel to sort of start, warming up and all the oil's flowing around. Once you get going, it's good. But and you have some good low down grunt. But I feel like I've had an engine change. But
thanks, interesting.
This what you've been sharing with me. You mentioned about paddling the boat and having the destination in mind, and that snakes and ladder up and down. obviously this relates very much to goal setting as well, I would imagine. And this whole idea of being prepared to know that, hey, you know what, if you're going to have some along the way, you're probably not just going to make a straight line towards your goal at the end there. It's going to be some ups and downs. As you've been talking, I've been thinking lots about my journey with the Lift Project. So, you know, for those who are not familiar, Lift Project's like a mental wellbeing program that I felt very impressed to create a number of years back. And I remember I was just so full of enthusiasm because I want people to know this stuff. You know, essentially at the heart of the Lift Project, there are things that you can do today that can lift your mood in your life, that can help you feel better and feel better about life. And people should know that stuff. So I'm super passionate about that. So, and I thought everyone else would be passionate about it as well. And so in my ignorance, I spent literally, probably it took a couple of years before I had the first version of the product, right? And I launched it in 2018. And it was on we created this learning management system, and there was these video assets and these things and that. Anyway, and then I opened it up that people could actually purchase this thing. And so we promoted it, and I just thought, this is going to go wild. It's going to go crazy. And about a week later, 4 people had registered for this thing and signed up. And I literally remember having this complete low moment of just like, and I remember saying to Sarah, what have I done? Like literally I'd spent years developing all these ideas and these assets and spent a lot of money creating this thing to help people, and then just 4 people. And, you know, and get this though, I actually contacted these 4 people just to find out if I could get some feedback from them, whether they liked it. And 2 of them said to me, oh, yeah, no, I haven't actually had a look at it. I just really liked the idea of what you were doing, so I thought I'd support you and buy a registration. And that was it. So I'm like, oh, what? And so, and I feel like when I think about the journey of the Lift Project, I've had some head in hand moments where you feel like it's just done. It's like, what am I doing here? You know what? And I would say I'm not on my second wind. I'd have to be on my 30th wind by now, literally. But what's been interesting is the encouragement of other people, that the difference that can make to get you flapping again. The other thing is that I'm so much more resilient now. When we have hiccups, or, you know, because the story is today, we've got over 50,000 people now that have participated in Lift, and I've got thousands of testimonials of people who say, I have done this, and this significantly helped me and my family and whatever. And so, but I actually find myself now, when I have a major setback in that space, it's almost in my head, even if I feel really low for a moment, there's something in my head that's saying, give it 24 hours, you're going to be riding high again. You know, you're going to be super passionate about this again. You know, that's paddling towards the light, you know, and it might be up and down, and sometimes, I've spun around by that wave. But you become more resilient. You definitely do.
This is a great place to arrive at, because it all of this reminds us, first of all, that second winds are real, no doubt about it. And we don't even have to be talking about physical challenges here. Second winds are real, and when we mentally, when we kind of enter that state, our brain shifts from primarily using the default mode network, which means that we tend to notice the discomforts, ruminate, worry, and so on, to a task positive network. So that's where we tend to focus more on an achievement. We focus on the outcome. We might even experience that state of flow that you and I have talked about in the past. Our moods tend to lift a little as a result of that. The decision fatigue that we were experiencing tends to lighten, and we kind of recapture some of our capacity to make decisions, and we feel more capable. So there is definitely the possibility of an upswing there, and it's useful, I think, to reflect on how we can harness and boost it. So one of those that we've just been talking about is having the right perspective of what this is going to look like, to recognise that those dips are going to be there, recognise that those lows are going to be there, not go into the journey anticipating that it's all going to be metaphorically smooth sailing. Early pacing, metaphorical pacing, I think is useful here too. So don't burn too bright too early. As you begin a behavioural change, chalk some small wins on the board first, and those small wins boost self-efficacy. They help to give us a sense of confidence about what we're doing. They become a bit of a buffer between where we were and already where we're getting to now. The support you mentioned is really important, being surrounded by people who are encouraging. I had a moment when you said that there were 4 people who bought the course. I had a moment where I thought, oh, are you talking about your wife and your 3 kids? But, but having people around us to support and encourage us, and for us simply to feel like we're not alone in this journey.
Exactly.
I mean, people don't even necessarily need to say supportive things. One of the things I noticed running the half marathon is that simply running in the midst of 40,000 other people all doing the same thing gives you a bit of a boost.
It does.
I'm not alone here. I'm doing this. There's other people doing this with me. Regular breaks along the way, of course. Which is a little like that metaphor of mountain climbing. Mountain climbers just they reach a shelf or a plateau and then they just stop periodically, regather, and then press on. I don't think any mountain climber just goes, step after step after step after step without any break at all. We need to pause and pace ourselves along the way, and possibly. The other tool that we can use is our old friend mindful attention. When we experience those moments of discomfort, accepting them for what they are, not putting more meaning into them than is necessary, but simply saying, "Yeah, okay, this doesn't feel great right now, but I know that I'm on the right track. I know that the inputs are right. Let's just keep going."
I like it. Yeah. Second wins. We should
second wind.
Find comfort in the fact that second wins happen. And in fact, not just second wins, but third wins and fourth wins and fifth wins.
30th wins. Yeah.
And 30th wins as well.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what my total tally gets up to in a few years' time, but it's still going. But Simon, may you have in your next half, are you doing a full marathon? I don't know if I should ask you that question.
I'm starting. So in trans-theoretical model terms,
pre-contemplation.
I'm in the contemplation stage.
Nice.
Yeah, contemplation. So, and contemplation. The other way of talking about the contemplation stage is also to say the maximally ambivalent stage. So my ambivalence is at a maximum right now.
Right. Well, as you move into the preparation and the action stage, just have in your head psychologically that there's probably going to be some low moments, but you're the kind of guy that bounces back.
Yeah.
So
little bit of action, man.
Good on you, brother.
Lift is presented by Simon Matthews and Darren Morton. It's sponsored by the Lift Project and supported by Avondale University. Music provided by Pixabay. If you have a question or a topic you would like to hear more about, send us an email to podcast@theliftproject.global. The Lift Project. Lift your mood, lift your life.